Death toll has risen in the Andhra Pradesh boat tragedy. Now 26 bodies have been retrieved. Until now, the search, meanwhile, does continue for the 21 others who are still missing. But at this point in time, authorities have recovered 26 bodies from the Godavari river after a boat capsized. Let's in fact go across to Neha joining us for more details. Neha, the death toll has increased. All right, we'll try and connect to Neha in just a bit, but this is the latest as far as the Andhra boat tragedy is concerned. There were 73 people on board and there are still 21 missing dead bodies. 26 dead bodies have been retrieved, 26 others were rescued, but the search continues. Meanwhile, started once again early this morning after it was called off for the day yesterday after the sun set. And Neha joining us on the phone line. Neha, if you can take us through the latest.
Well, absolutely, Avni. In fact, it's most unfortunate. We were, of course, initially the figures that they pegged of the number of people missing stood at about 39, but as many as a total of about 26 bodies have already been retrieved. That just, clearly goes on to tell us that the search and rescue operations would continue to go on in full swing, is what we're given to understand. You have teams of the NDRF, the SDRF, the Navy as well that are present at the spot. You also, of course, at this point in time have the sub-collectors at their respective, areas receiving all of these bodies. It is most unfortunate and possibly one of the worst riverine tragedies, of this entire century that, possibly of this entire decade, beg your pardon, that India would see. Now, also, Avni, if we have to talk about specifics over here, there are still about a good 21 people who are still missing, is what we're getting to understand. Currently, also, of course, search operations are underway to be able to, pull out their bodies. At the same time, there's also a parallel, where they are searching for the boat as well that has capsized, and possibly, once they get a peg of where exactly this boat might be, that's when they'll also start intensifying the search operations around those areas as well. We also saw how choppers were deployed, and at this point in time, of course, we'll really have to wait and see with regard to the investigation. We're given to understand that a case has been booked against the owner, but we'll have to wait and see how now further going forward are the authorities going to ensure that lapses, checks and balances are kept in place.
Yes, right. That's absolutely right, Neha. In fact, if you can also just take us through what are the kind of lapses that have been uncovered one after the other since the tragedy occurred.
Well, right from the time that the flood warning was issued on September 9th, ever since then you have the irrigation department and the police department that had issued strict warnings and they'd even sent out notices saying that boats should not be allowed to operate in that stretch of the river, the West Godavari River. But despite that, you had government boats that were stopped, but despite that, private boats, there were no checks that were kept on them. That's the first lapse. Now, secondly, when we're talking about the life jackets, now, first of all, of course, we were given to understand, as per the Tourism Minister, Avanti Srinivas, that there were not sufficient life jackets. Now, later, when that was clarified, when we found out that sufficient life jackets were present on board, all of the passengers were given life jackets. Many of the passengers had not worn it. Now, why was that not, looked into? Why was that not made a little bit more strict? Why were the officials or, the boat operators allowed to take these passengers on when they were not wearing the life jackets? Now, third, of course, and most importantly, were there lifeguards? Were there divers on these boats? Were there lifeguards on these boats, in the time of a mishap, who would be responsible or who would at least be able to help the passengers over to safety? That's also something that's being looked at, but really, most unfortunate that's coming to light over here. A lot of negligence, permissions that were not given, licenses that were not given, but despite that, you have these boats that are operating in heavy flood waters. Now, to give you an understanding of exactly why this incident might have happened, do remember that on September 9th, when the flood warning was issued, the floodwater levels were as high as 2 lakh cusecs. And on the day that this private boat was operating over there, the floodwater levels were as high as 5.13 lakh cusecs.
Right. All right, Neha, thanks so much for joining us with all those details.